Hello, Kiki readers. Today we are going to sew a reverse applique t-shirt. A reverse applique is when you sew a piece of fabric behind another piece and then cut away from the first piece to reveal the fabric underneath. This video will walk you through how to sew fabric behind the front of a t-shirt and then cut away the shape on top. First, prepare your shirt to sew as described in the 2013 February-March issue of Kiki. The preparations are steps 1 through 4. This video will be going over steps 5 and 6, the tricky parts of this project. Are you ready to sew something awesome? Then let's get started.
Okay, so I want to go ahead and point out a few things. When we go to sew this, the biggest challenge is going to be not sewing through the top part and the bottom part of this t-shirt. Okay, so if you do by accident, it's okay. You can just rip it back out. But you just want to be very careful when you're sewing that you are paying attention to how much fabric is underneath your foot, your needle foot. The other thing I want to point out is you want to sew as close to this white part as you can. But again, if it's not perfect, that's totally fine. This is for you to learn how to sew and have fun and make your own cool t-shirt. So this t-shirt will look how you want it to look. Be careful when you're sewing over these parts, since the pins are underneath. You won't be able to see where the heads of the pins are, and you don't want to run over those with the needle. So just try to be as close to the paper heart as possible. My shirt is open, and I'm going to put it under, make sure that it's separated, that the top of the shirt and the bottom of the shirt are separated. So I'm going to start at the point of the heart, because I feel like that will be easy to finish there. And I'm going to start about 1/4 of an inch behind the point, so that when I finish, I can finish more easily. Okay, so I'm going to put my needle down. And I'm just going to try and sew as close to this line as possible. And I'm just going to use a regular size stitch, and remember to back tack. So it's okay to go really slow so that you get the shape that you want. So this is going to get a little tricky when you go around the curve. Just go real slow and try and follow the line. You're going to have to turn it a little bit here. Now here's an example. I could see that it was starting to bunch, so I went ahead and tucked that back under so that I know that I'm just sewing through the front of the shirt. Okay, so do you remember how we always go over turning a corner? So this is one of those examples. So I put my needle down, and I'm going to lift up my foot, and I'm going to turn to the direction I want to go in. And again, I'm going to make sure that there's no other fabric in the way. One thing you can do if you get too nervous about tracing this shape is just get a piece of scrap fabric and tape a heart down and just practice sewing over it. So you're going to have to adjust as you go along. That's the hard part about when you sew in clothes that are already constructed. If you had made this shirt from scratch, you would have done this before you sewed it together. It makes it a little bit more complicated when you're making sure that you're not sewing anything together that you don't want to be together. Okay, so I'm getting to the edge of my corner, and I'm going to turn it so that I can line up my lines. Do you see? There's just it's probably hard to see, but there's just a little bit of a gap. So I'm just going to match my lines together. Okay, and I'm going to back tack. And snip your threads, and I just go ahead and snip them really close. That way I don't have to do it later. Okay, so now we're going to do the little heart. And instead of going through the bottom of the shirt, this time I went through the top of the shirt just because it's closer to where the little heart was. And again, I want to start at the point. Now since this one's a smaller opening, it's going to be a little bit harder. But just take your time. There's a little bit of thread there. Okay, so remember I'm starting a little bit behind the corner, about 1/4 of an inch. So do you see here, everything's starting to get bunchy. So I'm just going to put my needle down in my fabric and just kind of adjust so that it's an easier plane to sew on. Okay, I'm getting to the point. So we're going to treat this like turning a corner. So my needle is down in the fabric, lift up my foot and turn it. There we go. Anytime you need to make an adjustment, just put your needle down into the fabric and then you can do whatever you need to do. Something I want to point out is that I am using a bright orange thread. I do that for 2 reasons. One, I feel like you guys at home can see what I'm doing a little better, and 2, I like the look of contrasting threads on things. If you would rather do a gray thread, for example, if you're doing a gray shirt, that actually can sometimes conceal mistakes that people make when they're sewing. So that can be a fun little trick. Or if you just like the look of a gray on gray so that the stitch is a little bit more hidden, that's fine too. So that's just something to think about, is every detail in sewing. Is you can even think about, what color do I want my thread to be? Okay, so I'm at the end here again, and I'm at the point, and I just turned it around so that I can meet the line that I started off with. Okay, and just snip your threads.
Pause! It's your turn. Push the pause button on your screen and do this much at home.
Okay, so now that we're finished sewing, we're going to go ahead and take all our pins out and trim our thread. And we're also going to trim the fabric down because as you can see, we have more fabric than we really needed back here. And that's good because you didn't want to, run out while you were sewing. But that way it won't get in the way when you're wearing it. And usually that's a good idea anytime you're sewing. If you have excess fabric, it'll lay better if you go ahead and trim it down. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and snip my threads. Now, you have to be very careful during this part because you don't want to accidentally snip the t-shirt. So you want to go ahead and trim your back fabric without cutting the shirt. And just kind of, maybe about a half an inch away is good. And if at this point, when you flipped it inside out, you caught a mistake or two, that's fine. You can go back and fix that at this time. Just flip it back right side out, and just, you can either rip it out or, stitch a hole or. Okay, and this part doesn't have to be perfect.
Pause! It's your turn. Push the pause button on your screen and do this much at home.
So this part is the most fun and the most dangerous. This is the big reveal, so you get to see what your shirt looks like, but you want to be so careful not to cut through the t-shirt and the fabric you just sewed on. So go ahead and really pull it apart. See how I'm pinching it out so that I know that all I've got in my hand is the t-shirt. And I just cut a tiny little hole. Okay, and again, I'm just gonna keep kind of pulling back that other fabric. And you probably want to get within 1/4 of an inch of your stitch line, but you can do whatever you want. If you want a smaller heart inside, or if you want to cut a different shape, you could cut out a star so that you have a heart outline and a star in the middle. So I'm going to really take my time here because I do not want to cut a hole in the fabric behind it. And see, I'm kind of turning it around because I want to make sure that I get the best angle. Because you also want to try to cut as straight as possible so you don't get many jagged edges. See, like there's one right here that I'm going to fix here. Okay, so at this point you can just go, if you see any jagged edges, you can go ahead and try and fix those very carefully. It's probably a good project to have really sharp scissors for, like if you have special sewing scissors or something. Okay, so that's the little heart. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull these apart. I have a hand on the inside and I know that they're separated because I'm holding the underneath fabric, and I'm going to cut a hole. Okay, and just super carefully, making sure not to get the other fabric. And just take your time, don't rush this part. Okay. So once you have that cut out, you're done. Unless you could always sew on some sequins or decorate it, glue on some bedazzled gems or something. Use some spray glue and glitter, or you could sew on another piece of fabric. So if you just want the applique, then you're totally finished. And if you want to decorate, go at it.
Hey, thanks for watching and have a super day.
The end.